Hi, my name is Jonathan Hopp and welcome to the Coding Your Career channel. Today we're going to build an event management system using vanilla JavaScript and the Fetch API. So I am going to assume with this tutorial that you're at least a little bit familiar with vanilla JavaScript and how to, for example, target things by their ID or creating elements or having event listeners for forms or buttons. If those things are completely alien to you, you have no idea what I just said, then I did a project called a budget tracker, which you can hop on over there and take a look, and I go over those basic things. So the main purpose for this video is the Fetch API, or basically how can JavaScript make a request to an API for information. So APIs are basically how the internet has one system talk to another. So we're going to use web APIs, and we'll have a web API that will hold event information. So for example, beach cleanup day or outdoor movie night. So as you can see, this website has information on different events at different times, and we are able to, of course, look at these different events, and they're stored in an API, which you will be running locally. And if I have a new event, so if I want to do, I don't know, Oktoberfest, okay, which should be coming up pretty soon, and then, I don't know, 15th of October, and it will be at the Biergarten, okay, and we'll go ahead and create that event. And you'll notice that we have Oktoberfest at the Biergarten on the October 15th. We're also able to delete things, so we're not having the pumpkin carving contest anymore. It's been canceled, so we'll delete it and it's gone. All right, so as you can see, this is a full management system. We're able to create new events. We're able to see a list of our current events. We're able to delete events, and we're even able to edit events after they've been created, so we can make changes to them as we go along. This is called CRUD, C-R-U-D. It's an acronym. If you've never heard it before, that's okay. It stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete. These are basic functions that you write when you're programming, especially when you're dealing with common functionality. So for example, in our event management system, we have to create events in order to have events in our system, right? We need to be able to look at events, the whole list of events. We need to be able to edit them and delete them. These are common things that you do in an application, and that's why it's given an acronym. So most developers learn how to do CRUD functions, you know, with different examples. And once you get that mastered, you can move on to, you know, tougher things, more difficult things. But being able to master CRUD functions is like your first step. And we're going to also learn how to do CRUD functions with the Fetch API. Remember, the Fetch API is built into JavaScript, and it allows us to make calls to APIs. So we don't have to use Postman or anything like that. We literally have JavaScript like, hey, go make a request to this API, give me back the data, and then let's go on from there. So let's build this. Let's go ahead and start building our event manager, and hopefully we can really start to learn and dig into the CRUD functions and get our understanding of what the Fetch API does and how it works with JavaScript. Alright, so to prepare for our project, we're going to need an API. And one of the simplest things we can do is create a mock API that works locally on our own machine. That way we don't have to depend on anybody else. So we're going to use JSON server, which is a library, basically JavaScript code that allows us to, well, have a mock API running on our machine. So there's a couple ways to install it. So you can install it globally. Basically what that means is it's on your computer and you can use it in whatever folder you want. To do that, we're going to do npm I JSON server, all right? And then you have to have -g actually to say you're going to globally install it. So if you hit it, and then it will download the library from the internet, and we'll say something like change so many packages or whatever. Now, for some people, maybe you're on a work machine, or maybe for whatever reason you can't globally install things. That's still fine. You can still do npm I JSON-server, and what that will do is it will install JSON server in the folder where you're currently at. And you know you've done it correctly when you see a node modules folder and a package.json folder. And what these are well, they're for node packages. All right, so as you can see, if you go into package.json, it tells you that you have JSON server. All right, so you could do either which one, they'll both work. It doesn't matter. It's more convenient to install it globally, but that's fine. Also notice I have a JSON file here. It's called db.json. It doesn't have to be called that. I just called it that because it represents our database. In it, I've got an object. All right, so you're going to have an object, and the object is going to have properties. And each property is basically one of like the where the API will store information. So db.json is where the API is going to get its information from. So what do I have here? I have events, and I have an array of events, and you'll notice that each event has an ID, a title, a date, and a location. So we're going to keep it simple. All of our events will have an ID, the title of the event, when the event's going to happen, and what location the event is going to happen at. If you'd like to add some of your own stuff, by all means feel free, but this is going to be the basic information we're going to start with. So you can of course type this in yourself. Okay, make certain that you have an object as the topmost thing. All right, how do you run JSON server? All right, well, it's pretty easy. We're going to do if you installed it globally, it might be a little bit different. If you installed it globally, it's going to be JSON server, all right, to the command, then 2 hyphens watch db.json. All right, this is the command that you're going to put into the terminal that is going to tell JSON server to run and then use db.json as its basis. If you installed JSON server locally in the folder where you have a node modules folder and all that good stuff, if you did that, the command's going to be a little bit different. You have to do npx JSON server watch db.json. Okay, it's a little bit different. You're just adding npx to it rather than just typing JSON server. All right, once you hit it, and then you should see a little, like, I don't know, hearts emoji or whatever they call it, and then you'll notice that your API is running at localhost port 3000/events. Okay, so that means if we were to use Postman, we could actually like hit our API and look at some data. So let's actually do that. Right, here I am at Postman. It's not necessary. We're just doing this just to show you how this works. So localhost port 3000/events. So there we go. If I do a GET request to localhost port 3000/events, I get all my events. If I want a specific event, I can use a path parameter and put that in. There, I got number 2. You also can create events, right? So the JSON server has full CRUD functionality, meaning you can do create, read, update, delete. Okay, remember CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. It's basic functionality that developers usually put in whenever they have a model. So what that means is, for example, we can create a new event. So I can do a post, and I could add a body. Okay, so in the body, I'm going to do a JSON body here. I'm going to get rid of the ID because JSON server is going to give it an ID. And let's say the event is, I don't know, Jumping Jack Festival. Okay, and it's held in Times Square. Who knows? All right, that's going to be our event. Cool. So there we go. I'm going to hit post. All right, and notice that the ID came from JSON server. JSON server does strings for IDs, just so you know. It's not going to be a big deal. We won't really care about that. But okay, it's something that we can work with. All right, so again, if you want to delete things, you can delete them. All right, so we can do, like, I want to get rid of this Jumping Jack Festival, so I'll put its ID after the word events. Okay, and then I went ahead and let's delete it. So cool. It'll give me 404 not found. I hit it twice, and let's see if we see it in our list of events. Okay, nope, it's gone. So you get full CRUD functionality from JSON server. So it's extremely useful for our project. Later on, if you want to build your own API in like Java or JavaScript Node API, then that'd be great. But for right now, using the JSON server API is going to make our project a lot easier. All right, for the next part, we're going to create our list view. The list view is basically a page that shows all the events in a list. All right, so that's usually called a list view. So I've got my API running, and you know it's running because you can see that it shows the endpoints and things like that. If you hit Control-C or exit the terminal, the API will stop. So make sure the API is running when you make the call. That way it is actually useful. So how are we going to do this? I've created index.html. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code to just make some boilerplate HTML. And we'll come back here in a moment, but I'm also going to make a, let's call this scripts.js. We'll call it that. And I'm going to include it in my index.html. So script source is equal to scripts.js. That way it brings in the JavaScript file and we'll run it immediately. Okay, so let's think about what I want to do first. I want to have an attack plan. So I need to call the API to get the list of events. The events will be in an array. The events will be in an array. All right, then I'm going to loop through all the events and show them to the screen. Okay, so I'm going to call the API, get the list of events from the API because the API has the data that I want. And then I will loop through them. Okay, I can use a for loop, whatever kind of loop I want to use, and then show them to the screen. Okay, and then after we get the data on the screen, the next thing we'll need to do is clean it up with some CSS. All right, but for right now, let's at least figure out how we're going to get the data from the API using JavaScript. Now, before we were using like Postman, right? We would click send in Postman, and then we would call the API and give us back our data, which is cool, but we're programming now, so we have to tell JavaScript that it needs to call the API and get back the data so we can use it. Now, built into JavaScript is called the fetch API. So the fetch API is essentially a built-in function in JavaScript that says, hey, like you need to call an API, I gotcha. All right, so here's how you use it. Obviously, the first word is fetch. Okay, so fetch is the function. Notice how I just typed in the word fetch. We didn't install anything, nothing special. It just comes with JavaScript. All right, then inside fetch, we're going to put our URL, okay, the address on the internet where I want to send the request to. http://localhost port 3000, oops, let me hit backspace, /events. All right, now what is going to happen, okay, when we run this? Well, we won't see anything to the screen, so we got to actually go ahead and we're going to do what's called a then chain. All right, you're going to be like, what is that, Jonathan? All right, then we're going to do then response lambda console.log response. Okay, we're just going to do this first so you can understand what fetch does. So what I'm telling the computer to do is make an API call to this address, and once it's done making the call to that address, then do this. It's going to take the response, what we get back from the API, and console log it to the screen. So let's take a look and see what this looks like. Alright, so here I'm at index.html, I'm looking in the console, and let's look at the response. And it's got a bunch of stuff in here. It's got the body of the response, which is a readable stream, and then it's got a bunch of other stuff. But this does not look like event information, does it? Okay, I don't think so. I don't see my event information, because the event information should look the way it did in db.json. Should look like this. So what's up? Well, the thing with fetch is you have to take the response and format it into JSON, or else you can't really use it. So instead of console logging, what we're going to do is we're going to take the response and turn it into JSON, because JSON is the format that we use. All right. And then, so here's the thing about then. And again, you may be a complete beginner with using fetch. You may be a complete beginner with JavaScript. I still think that you can at least follow what's going on. Then basically it's sort of like, and then do this. All right. So we first fetch, and then we take the response we get from the API and then turn it into JSON. And then you do this. So it's sort of like a checklist. You're telling the computer, I want to make certain that these things happen in this order. Okay. Start here, then do this, then do that, then do this. All right, so it basically maintains an order of operations. Then what we can do is we can take the data that was converted into JSON, and let's go ahead and, oops, I want to do the other one. I'll face the other way. We're going to console.log the data. Okay, now notice how here I'm using curly braces, but here I didn't right after the lambda. This is a lambda or an arrow, some people say. The reason being is if you're only telling the computer to do one thing, you don't need the curly braces. But later on, I'm going to tell the computer to do multiple things. So I'm using the curly braces because later on I might put more lines of code underneath here. Whereas if you don't use those, you can only use one line of code. It won't format correctly. All right, so I am telling the computer go to this address and make an API call. Then take the response you get and format it into JSON, and then console log the data that we get back. Keep in mind, these are just variables, okay? Variables can be named whatever you want. I could have named this zebra, okay? And that's what I felt like doing, okay? These names don't have magical meanings. All right, let's take a look and see what we got. All right, so if you can see, we now have some JSON formatted events. ID of one, the date, the location, the title, all that good stuff. All right, so now we've got our data, all right, and it's formatted in JSON. So Again, just to kind of go over what we learned, we use the fetch API built into JavaScript, don't need to install anything. Inside the parentheses, you're going to say, where do you want me to send the API call? Okay, where should I chuck this request to? Cool, we did the request. Then take the response from the API and turn it into JSON. That's what this function does. It says take the response and turn it into JSON. Cool, when you're done with that, then in this case, we're going to console log the data. All right, our next goal is to actually take this data that we got back from the API, okay, that we see here, and we're going to, put it to the screen so that people can actually see it. Because remember, the console is not something that a regular person's ever going to notice, because probably before you even started web development, you may or may not have known the console even existed. So this is not a place where we're actually going to show anything. We want to take all this data, okay, and put it to the screen. All right, so we're going to do that in the next section. All right, now that we have our data coming from the API, we need to actually display it to the screen so the people can see it. All right, I went ahead in the HTML file and added a div tag. I gave it an ID of event container. And remember, the script tag should be at the very last thing in the body tag. Like you can't just randomly put it somewhere. Okay, it should be in the last part. All right, so let's target that. So I'm going to call const event container is equal to document.getElement by ID event container. All right, cool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to write a function that's going to be responsible for displaying all the events to the screen. So we're going to write a function, and I'm going to call it display events. It's going to take in an array of events, and that's going to be the events that are going to come from the API. So in case you're wondering how this flow is going to work, we're going to basically call display events, and we're going to take the data we get back and pass it in. So what's going to happen is that the computer will call the API, take what the API gives back and turn it into JSON. Then take that JSON data, which is an array of events, and give it to this display events function. So you will see there's a flow to this. All right, we're going to loop through all the events. So we're going to do for, and then what we can do is let event of events. So that's one way of doing a for loop. I like to mix it up. You can do a for loop using the index of the array. You can do a for loop. I think a for loop like this makes a lot of sense. I don't care about the index. I just care about the event. All right. And so each individual event will be here. Okay. That's each individual object. So just to help you visualize this, each event, right, is in an array. So I want to, so that a variable event will be each individual event as it loops through the array. It's going to go at 0, then 1, then 2. Okay, so let's continue on. All right, so what do I want to do for each one? I want to create a div tag. So I'm going to say event element equals document.createElement, and I'll do a div tag. So here's kind of the cool thing you need to kind of remember is that we're actually building HTML with JavaScript. Like I'm not going into the HTML file here and writing anything, as you can see. I'm sort of writing my HTML, but like through like programming, through like JavaScript. So then that way it can be, put onto the screen. All right. Event element dot class list. Oh, I forgot the N here. Event element. And we're going to add a class, and I'm going to call it event. And you're like, Jonathan, we don't have a CSS file. We don't have any classes. We will. Okay. Title element is equal to document.createElement. And I'm going to make this an h2 tag. And we'll say, okay, the text content is going to be the title of the event. Okay, sometimes IntelliSense does not know what it is. All right, and then we're going to add that to the div tag. So here's, again, this is where you have to have a bit of some imagination. All right, while you're doing programming, because like with HTML, it's very nice because you can just write HTML and immediately see it. With this, you have to imagine. You have to imagine that I'm creating a div tag like inside of here. You have to imagine, right, that I'm creating a div tag. You have to imagine I'm creating an h2 tag and giving it the event title inside of it. Okay, this is not something I'm ever going to type out. JavaScript is going to do this process for me because I don't know what's in the events until I get them back from the API. So I have no idea about the data. So I have to do this programmatically. So you have to imagine, okay, that we're building the HTML as we go. See, programming requires more imagination, I think, than people realize. Const, and then let's say I want to do data element is equal to document dot create element. See how we're using create element constantly? I want to make a p tag, and let's do data element dot text content is equal to, and we'll just say the date, and we'll actually, I want to use backticks here, and we'll say date and event dot date. Okay, cool. And then we'll append that, the data element, and then the location. So this handles the event's title. This handles the event's date. And the last thing we gotta do is handle the event's location. And it's pretty much the same thing. We're going to create an element. It's going to be a p tag. X text content, location element dot text content is equal to, and we'll just use the, we'll just say like location, okay, is event dot location. Okay, cool. And then we'll append it to the event element. All right, so now we've got code that creates an h2 tag for the title. We'll create a p tag for the date, and we'll create a p tag for the location. And now all we got to do is take our event element that we started at the beginning and append it to this event container here we already made. So this tag here really just exists to hold all the other stuff we build. We have to have something to like hold the stuff. So we'll do event container dot appendChild. And then we'll take this, the whole one, event element. All right, and so here we go. Let's try it out. Okay, and just to review, what I'm doing is I'm creating a div tag, and then I'm saying, okay, inside that div tag, we're going to have an h2 tag, which will have the title of the event. And then also inside this div tag up here, we're going to add a p tag and put the date of the event inside the p tag. Then this other p tag, we're going to take the location of the event and put it inside there. Then we're going to put it actually onto the page. This event container, which is referring to this div tag, okay, is going to actually hold all of our events. And we're going to repeat this process for every event we get back from the API. So let's see how this looks. All right, there we go. So now you can see we've got h2 tag. So if you look at the inspector, if you right click and inspect, see how this is this is an h2 tag, and this is a p tag, and this is a p tag. So like these pieces of HTML, these tags did not exist on the original file. So if we go back to here, okay, and compare it. So like a little side-by-side comparison. This is what I actually typed, right? I only typed like this, div ID equals event container. So that part, as you can see left on the other side, that's here. This other stuff, div class equals event, beach cleanup day, date, location, that stuff JavaScript put onto the page for me. So just to recap, what we did was we created a function called display events, which takes in an array of events. Where does that array come from? Well, the API. That's why we call the function up here. I like breaking things up because otherwise we have to put all this logic into here up with the fetch, and that would make fetch like really huge. All right, so I want to break it up a little bit. You could break this up even further if you wanted to, but I want to keep the video to be not so long. So we create a div tag, so you can like literally see like step by step. So let me put them side by side. So the first thing I told the computer to do was create a div tag and give it a class of events. See, here's the div tag, here's the class of event. That's what lines 16 and 17 does. It told the computer to make that. And then the computer also made an h2 tag with the name of the event, then the date, then the location. It put the h2 tag, the p tag, and the other p tag. So you'll notice here I did event element dot append child, okay, here, and then event container for the whole thing. So I put these three div tags inside the event container, and then I put each of these inside the event. So as you can see, I built my HTML with JavaScript, and this is extremely powerful because now, as you can see, I can have very dynamic data. I can have any number of events, and I'll show them to the screen. All right, cool. So we've got some the basic layout going. So we've got some ability to show events. What about creating new events? What happens when we have more events that we'd like to create? Well, we'll need to use a form, and we'll need to post the event. So far we've been using the get verb to get information. What happens when we want to go the opposite direction? What happens when we want to save an event? Well, let's cover that next. All right, let's make a form so that the person can fill it out and they can see their new event. I'm going to work in index.html. I'm going to put the form above the div tag, and we're going to use the same scripts.js to keep everything nice and simple. So let's make a form. Okay, we're going to form ID equals event form. Okay, we'll give it an ID. And then we're going to give it some inputs. All right, so remember the input tag is what you use when you want the person to type something. So we're going to do type equals text. ID equals title, placeholder equals event title, and then we'll say it's required. All right, because remember with HTML5 we can put validation straight in the tag. All right, and so I mean, if you wanted to, it will give you a boilerplate little message if they don't meet the validation rule, but that's fine for us. It keeps everything nice and simple. So we need the date. All right, and that's going to be required. And then we might have to also need so we're going to say type equals text, and this is going to be for the location, and we'll have a placeholder saying event location, and that of course is also going to be required. They got to give me everything. And we need a button with the type equal to submit, and we'll say create event. All right, remember this is a form, so we're using the form tag to bundle all of our different inputs. And then we'll have a button with the type equals submit, which is very important. This little detail is very important, inside the form tag, so that when we click on this button, it will submit the form, everything in it. Okay, one little thing for date, we actually can do type equals date. That way we can have a little date picker rather than having someone type in the date, which is, you know, people will type in the date a gajillion different kinds of ways. So having a date picker will make more sense. Okay, cool. So now we've got the form. All right. It's not going to look the world's greatest, but let's take a look so far. Okay, there we go. We got the event title. Notice that there's a date picker here. That's why setting the input type equal to date will do this. We got the event location and then a button. But notice, of course, that it doesn't do anything. We do have a validation, so we don't have a title. But let's say I do put a title in. I'll say Tiddlywinks. And that's going to be on, I don't know, the 3rd of September. And then the event location is everywhere. And if I hit create event, it does nothing because we haven't programmed the computer to do anything. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go back to our JavaScript, our scripts.js file. All right, now first off, I always like to target things at the top. So I'll do const event form is equal to document.getElement by ID. And then what did I give it an ID of? Event form. Okay. All right, cool. So now I've targeted the form. So now what I need to do is I need to say, okay, cool. When they submit the form, I want to post the event information. So we're going to make another function, and we're going to say function submit form. All right, now keep in mind, I was able to use these arrows next to the function so that way I could squish everything together. That way it's easier for me to like look at my file and focus on only the thing I care about. So let's handle the submit form. So how is this going to work? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to have the event that's going to be passed in. And we are also going to do event.prevent default. So that way the form doesn't just like refresh immediately when we submit. Then I need to get those 3 different input tags. So I have the this one here is ID of title, and that holds the title, the date, and the location. So I've got to get these 3 tags and grab their values. I can actually do that in like one go. So I can do const title equals document.getElement by ID title.value. Okay, so see, go ahead, value. Thank you very much, IntelliSense. All right, so I can target it and then get its value. I'll do the same thing for the date. Get element by ID, date.value, and then I'll do the same thing for a location. Now don't be fooled by my variable names. I just named things so I know what they are. I could name all of this zebra and it would still work. So I'm targeting the input tag. So here I'm targeting this. This input tag has an ID of title. This one has an ID of date. This one has an ID of location. I'm grabbing them. I'm saying, okay, JavaScript, here they are. I want you to do something with them. What do you want me to do with them? Get the value out of them. All right, what the person typed in. Okay, now that I've got those 3 pieces of information, I can actually go ahead and create an event. Now, keep in mind, I don't need an ID. The API will handle giving an ID to any new piece, to any new event. I don't need to handle the ID at all. I'll let the backend deal with that. So, we did fetch with a GET request. And notice I didn't actually write the word GET anywhere here, because the default request is a GET request. It's just default, you don't have to write anything. If you'd like to do something different, we can do something different. So we're going to do fetch. It's going to be http:// port 3000/events. Okay, we're still sending it there. But in the parentheses, we're going to have another argument, comma, and we're going to give an object. And we're just going to say method equals post. Okay, so we're telling the computer I'm doing a post rather than a get. Remember, the default is get. If you like to do something different, you got to tell it. We'll do headers. And we'll also tell it that we're going to send it some JSON data. Content type is application/JSON. Now this might look weird, but we have to tell the backend API that the data it should be expecting is JSON, because you may not necessarily be sending JSON data. APIs have to accommodate for non-JSON data sometimes. So we have to tell it, hey, what you're about to get in the body of this request is going to be JSON data. Okay, so we've got this, and then the next thing we got to do is we got to have the body of the request. Well, what's the body of the request, Jonathan? The body of the request basically holds, we use it when we have things that are more complicated than a single data point. What does that mean, Jonathan? Look at this. My event, right, is a bundle of information. It's an object. It's got a title, a date, and a location. Okay? Well, that's 3 pieces of data. I've got to take 3 pieces of data and bundle them together to say, here's an event. Well, what I can do is I can create an object and then make the properties the event. But this is a pretty complicated piece of information. Think about that. If we had to put that in the URL would be very long, and if we had a very complicated piece of data, we couldn't fit it in the URL. So the body is a great place to take more complicated pieces of information and store that information in the body of the request. So what we're telling the fetch API to do is set the verb to post. Here is the address, and here is the JSON body, right? The information I want to send to you, the title, the date, and the location. So you have to tell the fetch API that that's what you want to do. So it needs to know what the body of the request is. We're going to do JSON.stringify, and we're going to pass the title, the date, and the location. It will basically take this and it will turn it into a JSON object. So JSON.stringify will make certain that the body of our request is properly formatted. Okay, cool. So then once you're done posting, the event, all right, take the response we get back and turn it into JSON. Then I want you to take this new event that we got back. Notice how I'm using curly braces here because I'm going to do more than one thing. I'm going to console.log event created. This is just for debug purposes because, remember, a regular person will never see the console unless they know what they're doing. And then I'm going to tell well, here's the thing. We have a new event, right? And I want to update my list of events because now I have a new event. So what do? It looks like I can do this fetch thing again, but I don't really want to redo this. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to wrap this in a function. I'm going to call this fetch events. So I'll do function fetch events. Okay, and then I'm going to put all that in here. So it's reusable. All right, remember if we wrap it in a function, it's going to be reusable. All right, and then I'm going to just go ahead and use the fetch events, call that function. And so what will happen is the fetch API will do a post. It will post to this address. It will let the backend know, hey, you're about to get some JSON. Here's your JSON in JSON format. Then get a response from the API. The API should give me back what I just created. Cool. Take that event that's now formatted in JSON and then basically call the events again. All right. So call the API and then display the events. All right. And then I gotta do fetch events at the bottom so that it does it when the page opens. All right. So we did a little bit of refactoring, but you need to get used to that because you're becoming a web developer and refactoring is a fact of life. So just to go over things, we took our fetch, like our code to fetch initially all the events and put it inside of a function called fetch events. Then we created a submit form function where we will stop the form from refreshing. We'll grab the title, the date, and the location, okay, from the input tags on the screen. We will then do a post request to this endpoint, making sure it's a post, and then telling it, hey, we're going to send you some JSON, and here's the JSON we're going to send you, and we're going to make absolute certain that it's formatted properly. Then we expect to get a response from the API. So cool, take that response from the API and turn it into JSON. We'll make certain that we got the new event, and then just load all the events again so they can be displayed to the screen. Okay, last thing we got to do is we got to make certain that the form we have, okay, right now there's no submit. It's going to use an event listener for the submission. It needs to have an event listener that's on standby until the person hits the create event button. All right, so that's easy to do. We already targeted it at the top of the page, event form. So event form dot add event listener. Okay, and we're going to say submit. The event is submit. And then we're going to run the submit function, or they call it submit event, submit form. Okay, there we go. All right, and that will say, okay, Mr. Form, be on standby for someone to submit an event. Well, let's test this out and see if it works. All right, my event title is Pac-Man Tournament. And then that will be next, I don't know, October 2nd. It will be at the Mega Arcade. All right, I'll hit the create event button. And look, right there, our Pac-Man tournament, okay, with the date and what we put. So it looks like now we were able to create events by typing in some information into a form, hitting a button, and then the event gets sent to the API where it is saved. And then because it's in the API, we can, whenever we call the list of events, it will show up here. So now we're actually really cooking. So now we've got the create part of CRUD. Remember, CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. So we've got the create and read parts down. Let's handle the delete next. All right, let's delete an event. All right, so let's say we have an event and it's like, oops, I didn't really mean to put that event in. I want to be able to delete it. So first we're going to make the functionality for deleting the event in scripts.js. All right, I am going to put my functions together. So I have my display events function, my submit form function, and then I'm going to have my delete function, delete event function. And I'm going to take in an ID because I need to know the ID of the event. Now, one of the key things to remember is that each event is going to have a unique ID. And I know I'm saying the word unique ID and that means nothing to you. Basically what that means is each event has an ID and no other event has the same ID. So that's how I'm able to know that, like, for example, the Pac-Man tournament, the ID is 690F. So even if two events have the same title or maybe they're on the same date, I don't care about that. The Pac-Man tournament at the Mega Arcade on October the 2nd is 690F, whereas the pumpkin carving contest is an ID of 3. So the ID is unique. It is how I'm able to know which specific event. No two events will have the same ID. So it's perfect for deletion because I want to delete a specific event. So therefore I will need the ID of said event. Okay. So now we're going to use the fetch API, but just like with the post, what we did earlier where we had the post, we have to tell the fetch API we want to do the delete HTTP verb. So let's do fetch, and it's going to be, of course, the same URL we've been using, /events. Okay, Okay, except this time we're going to put an ID in here. So we're going to do slash, and then we're going to do $ID. All right, and put the ID inside curly braces. Okay, what this basically means is, hey, I want to fetch, but this part is going to change. All right, this part is going to be a variable. Okay, because the ID of the event we're going to delete is going to be different for every single event. All right, so what we also need to tell it that we don't want to just, we want to do delete instead of doing the get. So we'll do a comma and then curly braces, and then we'll do method is delete. Okay, all caps. Okay, and we're telling the computer this is what we want. All right, this is the let me get rid of the curly braces here. Okay, this is the method we want to use. Okay, once you finish doing the delete, then get the response back. All right, but the response is not going to be any data. When you delete something, you don't expect the API to give you back anything. It's deleting it. It's gone. Okay, so all the API is telling you is that, hey, buddy, I deleted it for you. So we'll do a little console log for ourselves saying the event with a specific ID is deleted. So, okay, but that's more for us. That's not for the user. What we'll do is we'll also just do, we'll also probably need to check to make certain that it went okay. We'll do that later, but for right now, after we delete the event, we'll just do fetch events. We'll just reload the list of events, so that way, once it's gone, they won't see it anymore. Okay, cool. So this is our delete event where we use the fetch API to say, okay, cool, I want to send a request to here. Now notice, oh, I should put these in backticks, my bad. Okay, so we want to send the request to this URL, but notice how this is a variable now. So essentially, this will change based on the event I want to delete. And then we want to do delete, and then I will go ahead and then once that's done, console.log for myself, and then reload the events. So that way we don't have to, once we reload the events, it won't be there anymore. Okay, we want to also probably have a button for them to click to delete. So in our display events, we're going to have some HTML for the button. And let's go ahead and do that. So after the location, we'll make a button to allow them to delete. All right, and then we'll do const delete button is equal to document.createElement button. So notice again, we can pretty much create any tag we want to create. Button tags, p tags, it doesn't matter. You can do what you want. The text content, what's between the buttons, is delete. And then we will add an event listener. This time it's going to be click. Okay, because when they click the button, I want to run the delete event. Okay, when they click the button, I want them to run the delete event. So what we'll do is we'll do lambda. Okay, we'll make a little function and we'll call the delete event method with the ID of the button of the event. Okay, and so that way when this button is clicked, now here's the cool thing. Every button will have a different ID, right? Because each event has a different ID. So the button will know which event it's for. You'll see in one moment that didn't make sense completely. Once you see it in the HTML, I think it will make more sense. Event element dot appendChild delete button. All right, and so this way we'll have delete buttons. When they are clicked, they'll call this delete event function, and then hopefully we'll delete the event and see what happens. Let's test it out and see if we need to make any tweaks. All right, doesn't pop out right now. We'll make something so the delete button pops out a bit more. But let's say I'm like, there's no Pac-Man tournament. Gone, deleted. All right, let's say, okay, cool. There's going to be a hacky sack tournament. I know I'm always competitive. And it's on the 2nd, and it's at the park. I'll create that event. Hacky sack tournament. All right, cool. Hit delete. It's gone. Okay, it's deleted. So now we're able to delete events. So we've got the CR and D of CRUD. the edit will be a little bit more elbow grease, all right? But so far we're doing pretty good. We were able to create an event, we're able to delete an event in case we want to get rid of it, and we're able to list out all the events and look at them. Now notice I haven't been doing anything with the CSS so far, right? Because frankly speaking, like that's the last thing I want to do. I want to get everything functional first and then worry about how it looks. All right, I don't want to have a Corvette with no engine. So let's make certain that everything works first. So we got the delete down, and just to recap, all right, see we're still using fetch, except this time what we did was with the URL we're using has the ID in it, so /ID, because I need to delete a specific event by its ID. Then we say the method is delete. Notice how we didn't have to put like headers and body here, because the delete requests don't have a body. There's nothing to send. You're just deleting something. All right. There's no headers. We don't have to tell them that they're expecting JSON, because they're not expecting anything. So these two parts, as you can see here, were there for the post, but they're not here for the delete because they're not necessary. So we send this request, and then when the request is, hopefully successful, we get a response. When we get a response, we reload all the events, and then our deleted event should no longer be there. Now the updating, which is the last part of CRUD, so create, read, update, delete. We did creation. We were able to create a new event. We're able to read all the events. We're able to delete an event. Now we need to be able to update an event, and that's usually updates the most work out of all of them. So let's make a function called update event, and we need the ID of the event we want to update. And then what we need to do is we need to look. What we're going to do is we're going to reuse this form. All right, so we have this event form that we've been using, all right, with these title, date, and location. So we need to go grab those. So we're going to do const title, and honestly I already used this code before. If you remember, that was up on the submit form, so I'm just going to reuse it. I don't feel like typing that all out again. All right, so we were able to get the title, date, and location, and now we're going to do the update. Now update's going to be a put. The HTTP verb we're going to use is put. And so put actually requires two pieces of information. So first off, we need to know what's the ID of the thing you want to update, so it knows which event to update specifically. Then you need to say, okay, cool, you know the event you want to update. Here are the updated values. Here's the updated title, date, and location. Maybe you only change one or two of them, but you have to give them all three, and that way you can update in any combination you so well please. So we're going to use the fetch API, and again, we're going to go to localhost. Actually, let's use backticks for this. So we'll do HTTP //localhost port 3000 /events/ and then ID, because remember we have to update a specific event by its ID. So then we're going to do comma, because we are not going to do a get request. Remember, get is the default. So if it's not the default get request, we have to tell it what we want to do. So method's going to be put, because we're doing an update. Then headers, because it expects information in the body, and we're going to say that the content type is going to be application/JSON, because that's what you should expect. And put request can have a body, so we're going to JSON.stringify, and then title, date, and location. Okay, so if you're thinking that this update kind of looks like a combination of, oops, didn't mean to put that there. This looks like a combination of the delete and the post, then you're correct. Okay, you'll notice that delete had this ID, right, in the URL, and then the post had all this JSON stringify body header stuff. All right, so it's kind of like a combination of both. All right, once it makes the put request, then take the response and turn it into JSON. Probably knows there's a pattern here. And then take the updated event, and then here's what we're going to do with it. We're going to fetch events, which is going to reload all the events. So it should show the newly updated information for that event. Okay, so I'll leave this up here. Again, this is probably the most, this one's the most complicated out of the functions that we've done. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to, essentially what we're going to do is if we look at the web page, when I hit edit, I want to fill this form in with the data from the thing I'm editing. So for example, if I hit edit for beach cleanup day, it should say beach cleanup day in this box with the correct date with the correct location. So I want to try to fill that stuff in. So I'm going to make a function for that. So you'll notice that I'm making functions for everything, right? Functions to submit the form, functions to delete events, functions to do this, functions to do that. And it's a good idea to break up your code into functions. So function show edit form, all right, which will take in an event because I'm going to be clicking the edit button, and I'm going to get document dot get element by, so essentially got dot get element by ID title, and then I want to have the value of that set to the event's title. So what does this do, Jonathan? Remember, I wanted to find the thing on the page with an ID of title and set the value to the event's title. So for example, if the event says beach cleanup day, then inside this input tag right here, I wanted to say beach cleanup day. Okay, that's the purpose of this. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the date and the location. So it's basically the same code, so I'll just move it around. So event.date and event.location. All right, we'll get the form, which we've already got up top. We already targeted it, so I believe we targeted event form. We already targeted it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the event listener that's currently on the form and get rid of it. So actually what I want to do is move this add event listener up here. Okay, all the way up here. That way it gets added. Just so it's out of the way. And then what I want to do is say, okay, cool. We got the form, and we're going to take the event form, and we're going to remove the event listener, because the form will have an event listener for the submission, right? When it will say, oh, cool, when we submit the form, add an event. For this one, I want to say, okay, remove that, erase it, and put this other event listener instead. So remove the event listener. What event listener? The submit event listener. And it did the submit form function. So remove that, erase it, get rid of it. And take the event form and instead add this event listener. Submit, and then I want to do the update event function. I told you that this was going to be the most difficult one. Okay, so here what I think we'll do is we'll just use an anonymous function, and we will just put what I want to put here. I just basically wanted to update the event. So I'll do function submit event. So we can just make the function in line, event submit. Let's see. So we'll do submit event.prevent default to keep it from keep the form from refreshing, and then we'll call our update event function with the event's ID. All right, so that comes from here. All right, so this edit form will basically fill in all of the different things for the event, like the title and location and the date, and then we'll go ahead and do the put request so that it will update it. Another thing I think we might want to do is, let's see this button right here. Let's give this button an ID, and I'll call it, I don't know, submit button. Okay, I gave this an ID. And then what I want to do is I actually want to change what that button says so people know that they're updating something. So what I'll do is I'll say document.getElement by ID event, I already forgot what I named it, submit button, and then I want to take the text content of that and change it to like edit event. So that way the person will know that they're actually editing the event and not just updating the event. I mean, sorry, just like they're not just creating an event, they're editing the event. Okay, so this is a lot of stuff. We've got the update event function, we've got the show edit form, and now we just need an edit button in all the way up here for display events. So let's go ahead and add it. So we're going to do const edit button equals document dot create element button. I know I'm jumping around a lot, but I am in the display events because display events is where we show each individual event. So if we have to have an event button, that's where it has to go, the logic for that. All right, so we create the event button, the createElement button for the edit. We'll say that the edit button dot text content equals edit. That way they know what they're doing. All right, and then what we'll do is we'll add an event listener, edit button dot add event listener, and we'll say when you click this button, it will run this function. Okay, and then what function will it run? It will show the edit form, and then we'll pass the event in. Okay, so now you see why I did all the other stuff first, because this button's got to make use of all the other things. Now, one thing that will be a problem is if we switch, basically what will happen is they'll click this edit button, right? So let's try that out. Well, we have to add it to the form first, Jonathan. So event element dot append child, or else you won't see it. Edit button. Okay, there we go. Now we'll be able to see it. All right, so we have to actually put it on the page. All right, so when I click on the edit button, see how it fills in all the data? Beach cleanup day, blah, blah, blah. All right, so it should say create edit events. Let's fix that. Okay, I put this in the wrong spot. See, I do these off the cuff so you can see me make mistakes. All right, so you know everyone isn't perfect at coding, especially when this thing gets longer and longer. All right, so now if I hit edit, you see how it says beach cleanup day, and there's the date, and there's sunny beach, and now it says edit event. All right, so now I'm able to change things. We will have a problem though, because once I submit the edit event, like once I say, okay, cool, I want to change it, then how do I change back to creating it? But let's first see if it updates. Sunny beach at dawn. I don't know. I'm hitting edit event now. All right, now it says sunny beach at dawn, and notice how everything reset. Okay, we can create an event now. So let's go ahead and say new event. This time it's the World Arm Wrestling Championship. Okay, which is going to take place, I don't know, in a few months. Who knows? There probably actually is a World Arm Wrestling Championship. And it's going to be at the WWF Arena. All right, we're going to create an event. And there we go. And now I can say, well, wait a second. I want to edit this. It's not the WWF Arena. I'm so wrong. I'm going to hit edit. And now notice all this data up here is filled in. It's not the WWF Arena. It's at the Silver Dome, which no longer exists. It existed when I was a kid, but it's no longer there. So here we'll hit edit event, and if we go down here, it will say Silver Dome instead of WWF Arena. All right, so it looks like we're able to switch back and forth from like edit mode and create mode. So here we go, edit. We may want to have it to where the person can hit edit and then it goes back to the way it was, which would be nice. That'd be like a little add-on we can do. But the main thing I wanted to do was just update the event. All right, so let's go over. This is probably the most complicated part out of everything we've done. And updates are always complicated. So we have an update event function that will fill in all of the different input tags with the data from the event that we would like to update. Then we're going to use the fetch API to do a put request. We need to have the ID in the URL because the API needs to know which event do you want to update. Well, the ID is how we identify the event. Then we include the header saying you're about to get some JSON, and here is the JSON. Remember, the body is going to be the data of the event, the title, the date, and the location, all packaged together in an object. And we're going to chuck it to the API. Cool. Go ahead and take the response, turn it into JSON, and then go ahead and fetch events. Remember, fetch events function just refreshes the list. All right. We also want to be able to have like an edit mode. So when we do edit mode, we do show edit form. We're gonna fill in all of those input tags with the data from the event. We're going to change the text of the button to say edit event. We're going to remove the event listener from the form. So the old one will be gone, and then instead we'll add an event listener saying, okay, cool. Go ahead, and when the person hits a submit button, instead of creating the event, we're going to update the event. All right, so this is probably the most complicated thing out of the whole shebang. Then we had to add the edit button that had an event listener that said, okay, cool, show edit form with the event, and passing all that stuff in. And then we were able to just add the edit button. So now we've got CRUD functions. We've got complete and total CRUD for our event. And now the last thing we got to do is try to make it look pretty. Now the last thing I did was added some CSS to make this look a little bit better. So we've got the form at the top, and then each event has its own little like card, I guess you could say. So that way you can like scroll up and scroll down. It's got a little bit more space. Now I could probably tweak it a bit more, but like I said, I'm more interested in the functionality and using the fetch API than anything else. But if you wanted to know, I created a styles.css, which I link rel equals style sheet up in the head tag. I put everything inside of a container. So I made a div. I gave it an ID of container and put everything inside of it. And then if you'd like to look at the CSS, I can leave it up on the screen for a little bit. So here's the body. And again, I fully expect you to pause the video if you're trying to follow along. That there's no problem in doing that. That way you can kind of see what things are going on. Have the container, class, the form inputs, the buttons. Okay, and again, this also is on GitHub, so if you want to go look at the code there, I think that would probably be pretty good. All right, so I'm not going to spend too long on the CSS. It really was the last thing to like touch everything up, but the main point is, of course, the fetch API. Okay, the fetch API is built into JavaScript. It is what allows us to have JavaScript call an API and get back a response. So what we've done is we've done what's called CRUD, create, read, update, delete. So we have an event website, but maybe in the future we have a website on recipes. Then you could do CRUD functions for recipes, where you would create a recipe, read a recipe, update recipes, or delete recipes, or anything else. All right, so just because this is an event doesn't make it special. You could do CRUD functions for pretty much any model that you may be able to think of. All right, so hopefully you understand fetch a bit better. Okay, fetch by default does a get request, but if you need to for fetch to do other things, so for example like posting, where's my post? Here's my post. All right, here is an example of a post. Okay, where we change the method to post, including a body and a header. And then for delete, we don't need a body or a header. We can just use the delete method. And for the update, which is, as you can see, the most complicated out of all of them, we have the put method, which will require a body and also will require us to tell it the ID of the thing that we want to update. All right, so again, update was probably the biggest thing there. So try to follow along with the tutorial as best you can. I do a lot of the ththings. So if you were here for the budget tracker, that was another good tutorial for you to brush up on your vanilla JavaScript. Okay, again, you need to practice using event listeners, get element by ID, but the main focus of this video was the fetch API. So hopefully you understand more about how to do that. And this project really hopefully helped you gain some skills in that regard. So hopefully you enjoyed the video, and my name is Jonathan, and have a lovely day.